Let's talk about the next person that the Lions realistically need to think about in the offseason. That's Ben Johnson. Now, I know that Woodward Sports, I know a couple of other places are making a huge deal about Ben Johnson potentially, becoming a head coach somewhere because a lot of teams have requested interviews with him. The Panthers are one. I believe that the Texans are another. I think also maybe I know at least 2 or 3 teams have requested him, but I know for a fact that the Texans and Panthers have requested him. If you all know who the other ones are, please by all means drop it in the comments and we'll go from there. But I know Ben Johnson has been requested by several teams for head coaching interviews. I know that. And let's be entirely honest here. Everybody knew that was coming. You could see that from a mile off, even if you were blind. You knew that was going to happen, folks. And when you take a look at Ben Johnson here, it's not at all surprising that Ben Johnson is getting these head coaching interviews. It's not. And here's the reason why it's not surprising. The NFL is a copycat league. We've heard it all before. It's a copycat league. The NFL is trying to copy somebody else's success and bring it to their franchise because they want it. It doesn't always work. The Lions are very well acquainted with this whole process because we decided we were going to bring Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn here to replicate the Patriot way, and the Patriot way wound up being an absolute disaster. So trying to copycat something is not always going to work. But I know there's a lot of Lions fans out there that are really, really worried about the prospect of losing Ben Johnson because they think that if Ben Johnson leaves, they think seriously that this offense is going to regress and that Jared Goff is going to regress and we're going to fall back into mediocrity next year. This is why I don't think that's the case. This is why I seriously don't think that's the case. And I'm not saying it's because Ben Johnson isn't the guy. I'm not saying that Ben Johnson is bad. I'm not saying that Ben Johnson is just a bunch of hot air. I know Ben Johnson is a good coach. I know that for a fact. But when people want to place as much emphasis as they do on Ben Johnson as if he is somehow the glue that is holding this offense together, it's like, wait a minute, back up here a minute, folks. Let's first understand how Ben Johnson got the job that he got. First and foremost, it was because when Anthony Lynn, a very seasoned offensive coordinator and head coach, came into Detroit, he could not make an offense work with Jared Goff. He couldn't make it work. So it's like, okay, here, either Anthony Lynn is just really bad as an offensive coordinator and head coach, which that's entirely possible, or Jared Goff just couldn't work with Anthony Lynn or vice versa. There's a couple of scenarios that could play out. But either way, the point is Anthony Lynn was fired. His play call duties were removed, and then Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson took over as far as the play designing, play calling, the whole 9 yards for the end of 2021. And the offense, it improved. It improved dramatically. So then you go into 2022. Dan Campbell's kind of kicking around the idea, well, should I continue to call the plays or should I have Ben Johnson call the plays? Well, let's first understand something here, why ultimately I thought Ben Johnson was going to call the plays in the first place. It's because if y'all remember, Ben Johnson sat down with Jared Goff, I don't know what it was, like a week or two in the offseason, and they literally sat down, and the two of them, again, I say that, the two of them together sat down and they built this offense together. It's not like Ben Johnson just magically built this offense out of nothing and said, here you go, Jared, this is what we're running. No, Ben Johnson collaborated with Jared Goff and said, hey, what is it that you do well? And we're going to incorporate that into this offense, and we're going to try and find something that works with you and vice versa. And that's what happened. A lot of Lions fans conveniently forget that it wasn't just Ben Johnson that made this offense. It was also Jared Goff. Jared Goff had just as much of a fingerprint on the orchestration and architecture of this offense. So now we get to the point where we're at right now. The Lions have had a top 5, top 10 offense all year, and now Ben Johnson's getting all these interview requests. Well, now you've got Lions fans that are like, man, if we lose Ben Johnson, is Jared Goff going to regress? Is this offense going to regress? Are we going to fall back into mediocrity? Here's why I think it's not going to happen. Because, okay, you lose Ben Johnson potentially, and I'm going to say that word again, potentially lose Ben Johnson. Here's the thing. Jared Goff has already established that he knows what he's looking for in this offense, and all of the players are pretty much coming back. The new offensive coordinator is obviously going to try and bring his own spin on it. But do you honestly think that Dan Campbell is going to let that offensive coordinator come in and completely change everything just because, well, I don't like this offensive system. I want to run with my own system. There's no way that's happening. The offense that the Lions had this year, even if a new offensive coordinator comes in, there's no way they're going to let that offensive coordinator completely derail everything that's happened. They're going to be like, listen, if you're going to come in and be the new offensive coordinator, you need to work with Jared to make sure this is an offense he is comfortable with and that he can run. They're not just going to let an offensive coordinator come in after Ben Johnson potentially leaves and let that offensive coordinator completely derail everything. So that's why I don't think Lions fans should be even worried if Ben Johnson leaves, number one. But here's another reason why I don't think they need to worry about Ben Johnson leaving. I don't think Ben Johnson is leaving, period. Here's the reason why. The reason why I don't think that Ben Johnson is going to leave is because I don't think that any teams are seriously going to want to take Ben Johnson. I think more what teams are doing right now is they're kind of surveying they're kind of surveying what's out there. They're trying to see what is potentially out there. Ben Johnson is a hot commodity right now, but here's the thing. Ben Johnson only has 1 year as an offensive coordinator calling plays. 1 year. Most teams, if they're seriously going to look at trying to hire somebody to be a head coach, they want somebody who's had at least a couple of years of experience calling plays, whether it's offense or defense, or they want somebody who has prior experience as a head coach at the college level or at the NFL level. Ben Johnson does not have either of those. Yes, he's been in the league for a couple of years. Well, not a couple of years. He's been in the league for quite a couple of years as, as positional coaches and other things. That's fine. But if you're going to hire a guy as your head coach, you want that guy to have all the experience of being a play caller and being in charge of something. This is the first year Ben Johnson has had that. I don't see these teams seriously giving an offer to Ben Johnson unless he does it for another year or two. That's why I think Ben Johnson getting all these interview requests is just par for the course. These teams simply want to feel out what Ben Johnson is and feel out what these other coaches are, because let's not forget, who else is also on the market right now? Oh, that's right, Jim Harbaugh. Oh, that's right, you've also got Sean Payton. And you got all these other coaches that are potentially making their way into the whole conversation, because here's another offensive coordinator or an offensive mind that's been out there for years that constantly gets interview requests, but nobody ever hires him. Oh, that's right, Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's been a head coaching guy for the last couple of years. And realistically, people have requested him, but nobody ever hires the guy. So what makes you think that people are going to go after Ben Johnson after having one stellar year when the offensive coordinator out in Kansas City's had stellar year after stellar year after stellar year and nobody's hired him? That's why I don't think Ben Johnson's going anywhere. You've got too many good actual head coaching candidates that are out in the market right now, such as Jim Harbaugh, such as Sean Payton, and even you got Jim Caldwell that's getting interest again. So it's like, listen, you've got all these other guys, and there's like, what, five or six different head coaching slots that are available. I don't realistically think Ben Johnson's going to get one of them. I personally think that Ben Johnson is going to come back. And now that I've finished the segment, I'm going to take a look at some of these comments here really quickly. Fresh and Fly says, we're worried about this because this is the first time in a while we've had something good going for us, and now it's about the possibility of it being stripped away. And I understand that. I get it. Lions fans have been wanting something good for so long, whether it's players, whether it's coaches, whether it's the organization, and they're afraid that, like the kid finally getting what it wants, like a kid getting finally the piece of candy or whatever it wanted, it's just going to have the rug pulled out from underneath it. I understand that. I get that fear. But understand something. The fact that you've got teams that are interested in what the Lions are doing, that means that it's not just the individuals. It's the whole team itself that's working. And I think this team is a lot more deeper than just, hey, it's one person that's making everything work. This is a whole team effort. The players, the coaches, the organization. You take away one piece, it's not like a house of cards. It's not like, oh, if you take out one card, the whole house falls. I don't see that happening with the Lions. This team is way more resilient and it's way more well built than that. Thank you, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. Jose Zamora says, Ben is the one calling. The OP plays everything close, plays every close game. It's not Goff or Campbell. Well, I don't agree with you, Jose. I don't agree with you because here's the thing. While Ben Johnson's calling the plays, who's the one out there that's making the plays happen? It's Jared Goff. Jared Goff has to call the checks. He has to call the kills. He has to read the defense. He has to make the throws. That's not Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's just simply calling the plays. It's then Jared Goff's ability to go out and make the magic happen. Ben Johnson is not going to go out there and make the magic happen. Ben Johnson couldn't do that even if he wanted to. Jared Goff has the play, and then he has to make it work. Yes, I get Ben Johnson has a crucial part, but it's like, listen, Ben Johnson is one individual in the whole process. Jared Goff is the one that has to go out there and make it actually happen. And again, like I said earlier in the segment, if you take Ben Johnson out, they're not going to bring in a new offensive coordinator that is going to completely strip the offense down to its bare bones again and try and rebuild a brand new offense. They're not going to do that. The offensive coordinator is going to have to work with Jared Goff, and Jared Goff's going to be like, listen, this is what works well with us. This is what works well with me. You need to work with that. And if not, then chances are that offensive coordinator is not going to get a job. Fresh and Fly says they just want to see if the system he runs is sustainable. One good year for an offense isn't good enough. Teams have to see if other teams can stop it first before they commit to hiring a guy. Thank you. Thank you. That is a perfect way to look at it. Teams want to make sure that if they hire a guy, it is a sustainable thing that they can get. They don't want a flash in the pan. They don't want a one-and-done kind of situation. They've seen that happen too many times. They want to make sure if they hire some guy to be their head coach, he can do it year after year after year after year. Because teams are looking for their next Andy Reid, the next Mike Tomlins. They're looking for guys like that, guys that can consistently win even if the chips are down, like Mike Tomlin has had the last couple of years. That guy has not yet had a losing season. Even when chips are down, he still finds a way to win. That is the mark of a beautiful head coach that knows what he's doing. And again, don't get me wrong. I think Ben Johnson is going to be a great coach in this league, but he's only had 1 year as an offensive coordinator. I don't see any team that is missing a head coach right now seriously wanting to give him the job, because some of those teams have just had that situation. Perfect example. Take a look at the Arizona Cardinals. They just fired Cliff Kingsbury, a guy who was this massive offensive guru in college. He comes out to Arizona and he has 1, maybe 2 years where things go good, and then everything just falls apart and he's fired. I mean, and then you take a look at the Denver Broncos. They just hired Nathaniel Hackett, a guy who is a seasoned offensive coordinator with the Green Bay Packers, and they didn't even wait till the end of the season to fire him. What makes you think that a team is going to hire a 1-year offensive coordinator that had a great year to be their next head coach? That to me just makes no sense. Absolutely makes no sense. Let's see here. Bo Booth says Ben Johnson might be getting these interviews because he's available. There are candidates that are still coaching. That's also another good way to look at it, because candidates can't necessarily be interviewed until their teams have been eliminated from the playoffs. Well, like I just said, the enemy, he's with the Chiefs. They haven't been eliminated yet. And there's other guys that haven't been eliminated yet either, and they have to wait till they're eliminated. Jose Zamora says, but Ben Johnson is the brain. Ben Johnson is half of the brain. Again, Ben Johnson did not make this offense all by himself. It's not like Ben Johnson just twirled a magic wand and like freaking, the fairy godmother out of Cinderella or anybody else that's got magical powers just say, oh, poing, here's this offense, now we're going to run with it. No, Ben Johnson is half of the brain to Jared Goff. Because if you honestly think that just Ben Johnson just comes up with the offensive game plan every week and doesn't consult Jared Goff, that's foolish. That's absolutely foolish. Ben Johnson is part of the equation. He is very important to this offense. I'm not going to deny that. But if you're realistically going to think that Ben Johnson is what makes everything work and that Jared Goff is a byproduct of that, then I'm sorry. How did that work with Sean McVay and Jared Goff? Jared Goff was with Sean McVay for how many years? 3 or 4 years? The first 2 years were great. The last 2 years were not so great. So then Jared Goff comes out here and he gets another dude and he does the exact same thing. Is it possible that Jared Goff actually is doing his job and the coaches are doing their jobs with him? Because if it happened only once and never again, then yeah, I would say it was the coaches. But it's happened twice now. I think we have to give Jared Goff some credit here, don't you? Jose Zamora says, I just don't want to lose this guy. His plays are so good. The Penei Sewell play, the play against Green Bay, the play against the Jets, and so on. So again, don't get me wrong, Jose. I totally agree with you. Ben Johnson is very innovative. He's very creative. He knows what he needs to do for the most part to get plays going. And again, he has shown that innovation. He has shown that creativity. But again, I don't think constantly, how do I put this? Worrying about something is not going to make it any better. Again, not to go too deep into scripture or into the biblical aspect here, but it's like, what is worrying going to gain you? It's not going to gain you anything. If you constantly worrying about something, all you're going to get is a whole bunch of gray hairs. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And the Lions are going to freaking, they're going to find a way to deal with it and they're going to move forward. So us worrying about it is not going to change anything. It's just, we're going to have to deal with it. But again, I'm not choosing to worry about it because of two reasons. One, I can't change it if it does happen. And number two, I don't think it's going to happen in the first place. So that's why I have the confidence to sit where I'm at and say, I'm not worried about it.